Captain Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he stared at the readings on his screen. The deep space mining ship Endeavour had been traveling for 3 weeks to reach the Kepler 442 system, and now they were finally here. Jake had been running mining operations for 15 years, but this job felt different. The asteroids in this system were supposed to contain rare metals that Earth desperately needed for their expanding space program. Lisa Carter, the chief engineer, walked onto the bridge with a worried look on her face. She had been monitoring the ship's sensors for the past hour, and something was not right. The energy readings she was seeing made no sense at all. There should not be any power sources this far from any known civilization, but her instruments were picking up massive energy signatures coming from what looked like empty space. Dr. Alex Hughes joined them on the bridge, carrying his tablet filled with xenobiology data. Alex was the smartest person Jake had ever met, and if anyone could figure out what they were dealing with, it would be him. Alex looked at Lisa's readings and his face went pale. He had seen energy signatures like this before, but only in theoretical studies about advanced alien civilizations. The mining operation was supposed to be simple. They would scan the asteroids, identify the ones with the highest metal content, and then use their mining equipment to extract what they needed. But now they had stumbled onto something that could change everything humanity thought they knew about the galaxy. Lisa ran another scan of the area where the energy readings were coming from. The numbers on her screen kept getting higher, and she realized they were looking at something truly massive. Whatever was out there was easily the size of a small moon, but it was completely invisible to their optical sensors. Only their energy detectors could pick it up. Dr. Hughes checked his xenobiology database and found references to cloaking technology that some advanced species might possess. The theory was that a civilization advanced enough could bend light around their structures, making them completely invisible to most forms of detection. But this was supposed to be theoretical, not something they would actually encounter on a routine mining mission. Jake made the decision that would change human history. He ordered Lisa to run a full mineral scan of the asteroid field, using their most powerful sensors. The scan would penetrate deep into the asteroids to map their internal structure and composition. What Jake did not know was that the scan would also disrupt any cloaking fields in the area. The moment Lisa activated the mineral scanner, alarms began blaring from somewhere in empty space. Suddenly, a massive structure materialized in front of them. It was unlike anything any human had ever seen. The station was enormous, with sleek curves and strange materials that seemed to shimmer in the starlight. Lights were flashing all over its surface, and it was clear that their scan had triggered some kind of alert system. Within minutes, smaller ships began emerging from docking bays on the massive station. These ships moved with a grace and speed that human technology could not match. Jake ordered his crew to remain calm and avoid any aggressive actions. They were clearly outmatched, and the last thing they wanted was to start an interstellar war by accident. The alien ships surrounded the Endeavour, but did not attack. Instead, one of them sent a communication signal that Lisa was able to detect. The message was in a language none of them had ever heard, but their computer began trying to decode it using linguistic analysis programs. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Torres took charge of the communication efforts. Rachel was the ship's translator and communication specialist, and she had experience working with the ship's artificial intelligence systems. She began feeding the alien language into their computer, hoping to establish some form of basic communication. After several tense hours, they managed to establish a primitive communication link. The alien who spoke to them identified himself as Commander Vexhai of something called the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. The translation was rough, but the meaning was clear. They had entered the territory of a galactic empire, and their presence was not authorized. Commander Vexhai explained that the humans were in violation of Imperial space law and that their ship would need to be inspected and possibly confiscated. He spoke with the authority of someone who was used to being obeyed without question. The Zephyrian Empire, he explained, had ruled this sector of the galaxy for over 3,000 years, and no species was allowed to travel through their space without permission. Jake listened to the translation and felt a mix of awe and annoyance. The discovery of an alien civilization was incredible, But he had a job to do. His crew had traveled for weeks to reach these asteroids, and Earth was counting on them to bring back the rare metals they needed. He was not about to let some alien bureaucrat stop him from completing his mission. When Commander Vexhai demanded that the humans submit to Imperial authority and prepare for inspection, Jake gave a response that would become legendary in galactic history. He simply said that they were just there to mine some rocks, and the aliens could have their space back when the mining operation was finished. The silence that followed Jake's response lasted for several minutes. Commander Vexhai had never encountered a species that responded to Imperial authority with such casual indifference. Every civilization the Empire had ever contacted had either submitted immediately or been conquered within a matter of days. But these humans seemed completely unimpressed by the Empire's power and authority. Dr. Hughes began studying the alien technology they could observe, taking detailed notes about the ship designs and energy signatures. Lisa continued monitoring their systems, making sure the Endeavor remained ready for any situation. Rachel kept working on improving the translation system, knowing that communication would be crucial for whatever happened next. Jake made another decision that would shape the future of human-alien relations. He ordered his crew to continue with their mining operation as planned. If the aliens wanted to talk, they could talk. If they wanted to watch, they could watch. But humanity had come here to mine asteroids, and that was exactly what they were going to do. The Zephyrian ships maintained their positions around the human vessel, but they did not interfere as the Endeavor began its approach to the nearest asteroid. Commander Vexhai sent several more messages demanding compliance with Imperial law, but Jake's responses remained polite and completely unhelpful. The humans acknowledged the Empire's authority, while simultaneously ignoring it completely. As the mining operation began, word of the encounter spread through the Zephyrian Imperial fleet. Never before had they met a species that treated the mighty Galactic Empire like a minor inconvenience that could be worked around with sufficient politeness and determination. High Admiral Keth Moran sat in his command chamber aboard the Imperial flagship Dominion, staring at the reports that made no sense to him. In his 40 years of military service, he had brought 47 star systems under Imperial control and negotiated the surrender of dozens of alien species. Every civilization the Empire encountered followed the same pattern: initial contact, demonstration of Imperial superiority, negotiation or conquest, and finally integration into the Empire as subjects. But these humans were different. They had not declared war, demanded territory, or attempted to negotiate treaties. They had not shown fear, awe, or the proper submission that every other species displayed when confronted with Imperial might. Instead, they continued mining asteroids as if the most powerful empire in the galaxy was nothing more than background noise. Dr. Elena Rodriguez found herself in the strangest position of her career. As the Endeavor's cultural anthropologist, she had expected to study asteroid geology and maybe write a paper about deep space mining techniques. Instead, she was now humanity's unofficial ambassador to a galactic empire, trying to explain human behavior to increasingly frustrated alien diplomats. The Zephyrians had sent a series of diplomatic envoys to the human ship, each one more confused than the last. Imperial diplomat Zarthun arrived with the full authority of the Empire, expecting to negotiate humanity's immediate surrender and integration into Imperial society. Instead, he found himself discussing mining permits and environmental impact studies with Navigation Officer Ryan Blake. Ryan treated the conversation like he was dealing with a local government office back on Earth. He asked about filing fees, permit processing times, and whether the Empire had any specific environmental regulations about asteroid mining. When Zarthun demanded to speak with Earth's planetary government, Ryan explained that Earth was governed by nearly 200 separate nations, none of which had given anyone authority to surrender on their behalf. The Imperial diplomat was baffled by the concept of multiple governments on a single planet. In the Empire, each species had one ruler who could speak for their entire civilization. The idea that humans might need to consult with hundreds of different leaders before making any decisions was completely foreign to Zephyrian thinking. Mining foreman. Pete Jackson made the discovery that would complicate everything. Deep within the asteroid field, his team found deposits of quantum crystals, the same rare materials that powered the Empire's most advanced faster-than-light drives. These crystals were incredibly valuable and strategically important to maintaining Imperial technological superiority. When news of the crystal discovery reached the Imperial Command, emergency council session was called. The Empire had controlled access to quantum crystals for over a millennium, using their monopoly to maintain power over lesser species. The idea that a primitive civilization like humanity could simply stumble upon such valuable resources was unthinkable. Commander Vexhai received urgent orders to secure the crystal deposits for the Empire. He approached Chief Security Officer Maria Santos with what he considered a generous offer. The Empire would allow humanity to mine the less valuable metals in exchange for exclusive rights to all quantum crystals. He explained that this was far more than most species received when the Empire claimed their resources. Maria listened politely to the offer, and then explained that humanity had discovered the crystals first, which gave them legal claim under salvage and mineral rights laws. She suggested that if the Empire wanted to purchase quantum crystals, they could submit a bid through proper procurement channels. The concept of finders keepers was completely alien to Imperial thinking. Communications specialist Danny Walsh had been monitoring Imperial communications frequencies using the translation software that Rachel Torres had developed. What he discovered sent shockwaves through the human crew. The Empire was mobilizing a military fleet to forcibly remove the human presence from the asteroid field. When Danny reported the Imperial fleet movement to Captain Morrison, the captain's response surprised everyone. Instead of preparing for battle or attempting to flee, Jake simply ordered his crew to work faster and sent a message back to Earth requesting additional mining ships. His transmission was straightforward and typically human. Found some rocks? Worth digging up? Might need backup if the locals get cranky. The Imperial War Council met to discuss the human situation, but they found themselves dealing with a problem that had no precedent in their military manuals. How do you conquer a species that refuses to acknowledge that a war has started? How do you intimidate people who treat your battle fleet like a minor business complication? Admiral Keth Moran had studied the military tactics of every species the Empire had ever encountered. Some civilizations fought with honor and courage before accepting defeat. Others attempted to negotiate for better terms of surrender. A few tried to flee to other star systems, but none had ever responded to Imperial military pressure by ordering more mining equipment. Dr. Hughes continued his analysis of Zephyrian technology, making detailed observations about their ship designs and energy systems. What he discovered was both impressive and troubling. The Empire's technology was clearly superior to humanity's in most areas, particularly in space travel and energy generation, but their approach to technology seemed focused entirely on control and domination, rather than innovation and exploration. The cultural differences became even more apparent when Imperial Economic Advisor Melketh attempted to explain the Empire's taxation system to the human crew. Every species in the Empire was required to contribute a percentage of their resources and production to support Imperial operations. In exchange, the Empire provided protection from external threats and access to advanced technology. Quartermaster Frank Miller listened to the explanation and then asked if the Empire offered an employee benefits package, retirement planning, or worker compensation insurance. When Melketh explained that subject species were not considered employees but rather Imperial assets, Frank politely declined the offer and suggested the Empire might want to review their human resources policies. The breaking point for Imperial patience came when Chief Engineer Lisa Carter began sharing technical specifications with Zephyrian engineers who were studying human mining techniques. Lisa treated the technology exchange like a professional conference, discussing the advantages and disadvantages of different mining approaches with colleagues who happened to be from another species. The Zephyrian engineers were fascinated by human problem-solving methods which seemed to focus on practical solutions rather than demonstrations of technological superiority. Human engineering was less elegant than Imperial technology, but it was also more adaptable and easier to repair under field conditions. As word of the human encounter spread through Imperial space, other species began to take notice. For the first time in centuries, a civilization had met the Empire as equals rather than subjects. The implications of this development were lost on the humans, who continued to treat the entire situation as a minor workplace inconvenience that could be solved with proper paperwork and reasonable compromise. The arrival of the Earth Colonial Mining Consortium fleet changed everything. Captain Susan Reed commanded the flagship Independence, leading 12 additional mining vessels through the same hyperspace route that the Endeavour had used weeks earlier. The Imperial forces watching the asteroid field found themselves facing not a single human ship, but an entire mining operation that had appeared overnight. Admiral Keth Moran called an emergency strategy meeting as soon as his sensors detected the new human ships. His military advisors had spent weeks developing plans to deal with one stubborn mining vessel, but now they were looking at a full-scale human presence in Imperial space. What made the situation even more confusing was that these were not warships or military transports, but converted civilian vessels loaded with industrial equipment. The Imperial War College had trained Keth Moran to recognize different types of enemy forces. Military fleets came with escorts and defensive formations. Invasion forces brought troop transports and orbital bombardment ships. But the humans had brought rock crushers, ore processors, and mobile refineries. It was as if they had decided to solve the problem of Imperial resistance by completely ignoring it and focusing on mining efficiency instead. Captain Reed established communication with the Imperial fleet using the translation protocols that Rachel Torres had developed. Her first message to Admiral Keth Moran was a polite request for traffic control information to avoid collisions during mining operations. She treated the Imperial battle fleet like a Coast Guard station that might have helpful navigation updates. Chief Mining Engineer Laura Kim immediately began surveying additional asteroids for mineral extraction. Within hours of arriving, she had identified 3 separate locations where processing facilities could be established. When Imperial Governor Hulmek demanded that the humans evacuate Imperial space immediately, Laura asked if he had the proper environmental impact assessments for the area. The Empire's frustration reached new levels when Quartermaster Frank Miller established formal supply lines between the human ships. Frank treated the logistics of maintaining a mining operation in hostile space like any other business challenge. When Imperial customs officials demanded to inspect human cargo transfers, Frank asked if they accepted purchase orders and whether they offered bulk discounts on inspection services. Security Chief Tony Rivera made the discovery that would change how humans viewed Imperial intentions. His monitoring equipment detected multiple Zephyrian ships conducting what his training taught him to recognize as reconnaissance patterns around human operations. Instead of treating this as preparation for military action, Tony filed a report, classifying it as industrial espionage, and recommended installing better security cameras. The Imperial approach to intimidation was being systematically categorized as a workplace safety issue. Tony's security protocols treated potentially hostile alien warships the same way they would handle suspicious activity around a construction site back on Earth. He posted warning signs, established patrol schedules, and submitted a request for additional security lighting. Dr. Hughes made first contact with a Keth Hari science vessel that had been studying human technology from a distance. The Keth Hari were one of the Empire's member species, known for their advanced scientific knowledge and careful research methods. What Dr. Hughes learned from them changed his understanding of galactic politics completely. The Keth Hari scientist, who translated his name as Dr. Veltar, explained that the Empire had not encountered a new spacefaring species in over 800 years. Every civilization they had met in recent history had either submitted immediately upon seeing Imperial technology or had been conquered within months of first contact. The concept of a species that simply ignored Imperial authority was unprecedented. In recorded galactic history, Dr. Veltar was fascinated by human problem-solving approaches, which seemed to treat every obstacle as a technical challenge rather than a political conflict. When the Empire demanded submission, humans asked about filing procedures. When Imperial ships took aggressive positions, humans recommended better traffic control systems. It was as if humanity had developed a complete immunity to political intimidation. The cultural exchange between human and HFY scientists revealed fundamental differences in how the two civilizations approached technology and exploration. The Empire used technology primarily as a tool for maintaining control and demonstrating superiority. Humans seemed to view technology as a means of solving practical problems and improving working conditions. Operations Manager Steve Johnson took the diplomatic confusion to new levels when he submitted formal applications to the Imperial bureaucracy for extended mining permits. Steve had researched Imperial administrative procedures and filled out the proper forms requesting permission to establish temporary industrial facilities in the asteroid field. The Imperial Civil Service had no procedures for handling permit applications from species that were supposed to be conquered or expelled. Steve's paperwork was passed from office to office, with each department claiming that mineral extraction permits for unauthorized species fell under someone else's jurisdiction. Engineering. Technician Chris Davis made a breakthrough that sent shockwaves through Imperial technology divisions. By studying Zephyrian shield generators, Chris figured out how to replicate their basic functions using human industrial equipment and modified mining tools. Instead of keeping this discovery secret, Chris filed a patent application and offered to license the technology to interested parties. The concept of intellectual property law was completely foreign to Imperial thinking. In the Empire, technological advances belonged to whichever species was strong enough to control them. The idea that humans might claim ownership of improvements to Imperial technology and then offer to sell licenses was beyond Zephyrian comprehension. Medical. Officer Dr. Amy Foster became an unexpected diplomatic asset when she successfully treated a Zephyrian officer who had suffered radiation poisoning during a reactor accident. Amy's complete lack of concern about treating an alien patient impressed even the most hardened Imperial military personnel. Her approach was purely medical, focused on patient care rather than political implications. When Imperial Medical Command offered Dr. Foster a position in their service with significant rank and privileges, she politely declined, explaining that she was quite satisfied with her current employment benefits. The idea that someone would refuse Imperial advancement opportunities was as incomprehensible as everything else about human behavior. Navigation specialist Jamie Lee discovered that Imperial star charts for the local sector were incomplete and contained several dangerous navigation hazards that were not properly marked. Instead of treating this as classified military intelligence, Jamie began sharing updated navigation data with Imperial ships, treating them like fellow travelers who might benefit from better directions. The Empire found itself in the unprecedented position of receiving navigational aid from a species they considered technologically inferior. Jamie's casual sharing of strategic information violated every assumption Imperial strategists had about how interspecies conflicts were supposed to develop. Captain Morrison received daily reports about the escalating confusion among Imperial forces, but his response remained consistently practical. His mission was to establish a successful mining operation and extract valuable resources for Earth. Everything else, including galactic politics and interstellar diplomacy, was secondary to completing the job his crew had been sent to do. The human approach to the Imperial crisis was becoming a crisis for the Empire itself. After centuries of unopposed dominance, they were facing a civilization that treated their authority like a minor regulatory inconvenience that could be managed through proper paperwork and professional courtesy. Captain Morrison found his daily routine increasingly interrupted by visits from Imperial delegations, each one more desperate than the last, to understand how humanity fit into the established galactic order. His ready room had become an unofficial, diplomatic center where confused alien officials tried to apply 3,000 years of Imperial protocol to a species that seemed immune to traditional forms of political pressure. Economic Minister Velsa arrived with what the Empire considered an extremely generous offer. Humanity would be granted junior membership in the Galactic Empire, with Earth receiving Imperial protection and access to advanced technology in exchange for tribute payments and acknowledgement of Imperial authority. The terms were far better than what most conquered species received. Morrison listened politely to the proposal and thanked Minister Velsa for the information. He explained that Earth already had adequate defense arrangements through their own military forces and insurance. coverage through various private companies. As for advanced technology, humanity preferred to develop their own solutions rather than become dependent on external suppliers. The concept of refusing imperial protection was incomprehensible to Minister Velza. Every species in the galaxy faced threats from pirates, raiders, and hostile civilizations. The Empire's military might was the only thing standing between civilized space and chaos, but the humans seemed genuinely unconcerned about galactic threats, treating interstellar security like a service they could purchase from competing providers. Chief Engineer Lisa Carter had been working overtime to expand the mining operations' capacity. Her modifications to the ore processing equipment had increased efficiency by 30%, allowing the human fleet to extract more valuable materials in less time. When Imperial Technology Assessor Kethval requested detailed specifications of her improvements, Lisa provided complete technical documentation and offered to train Imperial engineers in advanced maintenance procedures. The cultural exchange between human and Imperial engineers revealed fundamental differences in approach to problem solving. Imperial technology was designed to demonstrate superiority and maintain control over lesser species. Human engineering focused on practical solutions, cost-effectiveness, and ease of repair under field conditions. Lisa's improvements to mining equipment were less elegant than Imperial designs, but they were also more reliable and could be maintained by crew members with basic technical training. Operations Manager Steve Johnson continued submitting proper paperwork for extended mining permits, despite receiving increasingly frustrated responses from Imperial bureaucracy. His latest application included detailed environmental impact assessments, safety protocols, and economic benefit analyses that demonstrated how human mining operations would improve local space traffic and provide employment opportunities for Imperial citizens. The Imperial Civil Service was completely unprepared to handle permit applications that followed proper procedures, while simultaneously ignoring the fundamental assumption that unauthorized species should be conquered or expelled. Steve's paperwork was technically correct, but it violated every principle of Imperial authority by treating the Empire like a regulatory agency rather than a galactic superpower. Medical Officer Dr. Amy Foster had become a legend among Imperial medical personnel after successfully treating radiation poisoning in 3 different alien species using modified human medical equipment. Her reputation spread throughout the Imperial fleet, and she found herself consulted on complex medical cases by doctors who technically represented an enemy force. Amy's approach to alien medicine was purely practical. She treated symptoms, monitored vital signs, and adapted human medical techniques to work with different alien physiologies. When Imperial Medical Director Zarketh offered her a research position with access to the Empire's most advanced medical facilities, Amy explained that she was quite happy with her current work environment and benefits package. The idea that someone would refuse advancement opportunities within the Imperial hierarchy was as foreign to Zephyrian thinking as everything else about human behavior. In the Empire, promotion and status were the primary motivations for individual achievement. But Amy seemed more interested in patient care than career advancement, treating Imperial medical officers like colleagues rather than potential supervisors. Engineering. Technician Chris Davis had become the Empire's most wanted technology consultant after his successful reverse engineering of Zephyrian shield systems. Imperial Technology Command had classified his work as a potential security threat, but Chris continued offering technical assistance to any Imperial engineer who asked for help. Chris's approach to technology sharing violated every assumption about how strategic advantages were supposed to be maintained. Instead of keeping technological breakthroughs secret, Chris published his research findings and offered to collaborate with Imperial scientists on improving shield efficiency. He treated advanced alien technology like an interesting engineering puzzle rather than a military secret. The Empire's response to human technology sharing was complete confusion. Imperial Security Command had procedures for dealing with technology theft, espionage, and reverse engineering by hostile forces, but they had no protocols for handling voluntary technology transfers from a species that seemed unaware that such information was supposed to be secret. Navigation specialist Jamie Lee had been sharing updated star charts with Imperial navigation officers for weeks, treating the exchange of astronomical data like routine professional courtesy between space travelers. Her corrections to Imperial star charts had already prevented 2 potential navigation accidents, saving Imperial ships from dangerous asteroid encounters. The strategic implications of Jamie's casual information sharing were staggering. Imperial Navigation Command realized that human star charts were more accurate than their own for several sectors, suggesting that human exploration techniques were more thorough than Imperial survey methods. But Jamie seemed completely unaware that she was providing strategically valuable intelligence to a potential enemy force. Security Chief Tony Rivera continued treating Imperial reconnaissance activities as a workplace safety issue, posting warning signs and filing incident reports whenever Zephyrian ships approached too closely to human mining operations. His latest security briefing recommended that Imperial forces coordinate their activities better to avoid accidents during shift changes. Tony's security protocols had transformed potential military confrontations into safety meetings. When Imperial patrol ships took aggressive positions around human facilities, Tony contacted them directly to discuss traffic patterns and suggest better positioning to avoid interference with mining operations. He treated heavily armed alien warships like construction vehicles that needed better coordination. Dr. Hughes completed his comprehensive analysis of Imperial technology and society, producing a detailed report that would have been worth billions of credits to the Empire's enemies. Instead of classifying the information, Dr. Hughes submitted his findings to several scientific journals and offered to present his research at the next Imperial Science Academy conference. The Empire found itself in the unprecedented position of having their entire technological and social structure analyzed by an outside observer who then offered to share his findings with anyone who was interested. Dr. Hughes's report contained insights into Imperial weaknesses and strategic vulnerabilities, but he treated it like academic research rather than military intelligence. Captain Morrison's daily reports to Earth Command remained focused on mining operations and production quotas. His updates mentioned Imperial activities only as background information, treating the most powerful military force in the galaxy like a minor environmental factor that needed to be considered during operational planning. The human approach to Imperial authority was systematically undermining 3,000 years of galactic political structure. By refusing to acknowledge the Empire's superiority, humanity was forcing other species to question assumptions about power and submission that had remained unchallenged for centuries. 6 months after first contact, the asteroid mining operation had transformed into something unprecedented in galactic history. What started as a simple resource extraction mission had evolved into humanity's first permanent settlement beyond Earth's solar system. The colony, which the miners had named Rockport, included residential modules, recreational facilities, a medical center, and even a small brewery operated by former Navy cook Bill Thompson. The Empire watched in bewilderment as humans established civilian infrastructure in what Imperial strategists still considered a contested military zone. Children played in pressurized recreational areas while their parents operated mining equipment and processed ore. Schools held classes where human children learned basic sciences alongside young Keth-Hari refugees whose parents had requested asylum from Imperial military service. Mayor Jennifer Clark, formerly the expedition's logistics coordinator, had been elected by the growing civilian population to handle administrative duties for the colony. Her first official act was to establish municipal regulations for waste disposal, noise control, and public safety. When Imperial Governor Hulmek demanded to know by what authority humans were establishing permanent settlements in Imperial space, Jennifer explained that Rockport was incorporated under Earth Colonial Administration guidelines and was happy to establish sister city relationships with nearby Imperial communities. The concept of democratic self-governance was as foreign to Imperial thinking as everything else about human society. In the Empire, authority flowed downward from Imperial command through appointed governors to subject populations. The idea that humans would elect their own leaders and establish their own laws without Imperial approval violated every principle of galactic political order. Admiral Keth Moran made the decision that would define his legacy in Imperial history. Instead of launching a military assault on the human settlement, he decided to visit Rockport personally with a full battle fleet to demonstrate imperial authority and force human submission through a show of overwhelming power. The admiral expected to find a heavily fortified military installation defended by advanced weaponry and prepared for siege warfare. Instead, he was greeted at the colony's main docking facility by Mayor Clark, who welcomed him to their community and offered him a tour of the local school where human and Kethari children were learning mathematics together. Keth Moran had prepared speeches about imperial supremacy and demands for immediate surrender, but Jennifer Clark treated his visit like a diplomatic reception, introducing him to local business owners, community leaders, and families who had made Rockport their home. She offered him refreshments and asked if the imperial fleet would be interested in purchasing locally grown hydroponic vegetables. The breaking point for imperial ideology came when Maintenance Chief Gary Nelson fixed a critical reactor problem on Admiral Keth Moran's flagship. The Zephyrian engineering team had been struggling with a cascade failure in their primary power systems when Gary offered to take a look at the problem. Within hours, he had identified the issue and implemented a solution using modified human repair techniques. When Admiral Keth Moran attempted to pay Gary for the repair work, Gary refused any compensation and explained that neighbors help neighbors when they have problems. The concept of altruism without political motivation was so foreign to imperial thinking that it sparked a philosophical crisis among the fleet's senior officers. Imperial military doctrine was based on the assumption that every action had a political purpose designed to increase power and control. But Gary's repair work served no strategic purpose for humanity and provided no advantage in any potential conflict. He had simply helped because the Zephyrian crew needed assistance, treating enemy personnel like community members who required support. Dr. Elena Rodriguez submitted her final anthropological report to Earth Command, summarizing months of cultural exchange between humans and various imperial species. Her conclusions challenged every assumption about galactic politics and interspecies relations that had dominated thinking for millennia. According to Dr. Rodriguez, humanity had accidentally accomplished what no military force had achieved in 3,000 years. They had become the first species in galactic history to join the Empire as equals rather than subjects, not through conquest or diplomatic maneuvering, but by treating the most powerful civilization in the galaxy like reasonable neighbors who happened to live in the same cosmic neighborhood. The transformation of imperial thinking began with individual officers and crew members who had worked directly with humans. Zephyrian engineers adopted human maintenance techniques that were more efficient than traditional imperial methods. Imperial medical personnel began using treatment protocols developed by Dr. Foster that improved patient outcomes. Navigation officers updated their star charts using data provided by Jamie Lee. The cultural changes spread throughout Imperial space as officers returned to their home assignments carrying new ideas about cooperation, voluntary assistance, and mutual benefit. For the first time in centuries, Imperial citizens began questioning whether conquest and submission were the only possible relationships between different species. Captain Morrison received a formal communication from the Imperial High Council that marked the end of one era and the beginning of another. The document was not a surrender demand, trade agreement, or military ultimatum. Instead, it was a request for humanity to mediate a territorial dispute between two Empire member species who had been fighting for over a century. The Velkari and Zethmok had been locked in a resource conflict that Imperial military force had been unable to resolve. Traditional Imperial justice involved assigning territory based on military strength and political influence. But both species had requested human arbitration, believing that humanity's unique approach to problem-solving might find solutions that Imperial methods had missed. Morrison read the request while sitting in his captain's chair, looking out at the thriving human colony surrounded by Imperial ships that had come not as conquerors, but as curious neighbors seeking assistance with their own problems. The view represented a fundamental shift in galactic politics that no one had planned or predicted. The Zephyrian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 3,000 years through military might and political intimidation. They had conquered dozens, of species and controlled vast territories through superior technology and organizational efficiency. But they had never encountered a civilization that responded to imperial authority with polite indifference and practical problem-solving. Humanity's greatest strength was not advanced technology, military power, or diplomatic cunning. Instead, it was their absolute refusal to be impressed by anyone who thought they were more important than they actually were. When faced with galactic authority, humans had responded with the same attitude they brought to any other bureaucratic challenge: figure out the proper procedures, fill out the necessary paperwork, and get the job done regardless of whatever obstacles appeared. The transformation of the Galactic Empire began with a simple mining operation that refused to be intimidated by political authority. By treating the Empire's demands like workplace regulations that could be managed through proper compliance procedures, humanity had accidentally created a new model for interspecies relations based on mutual respect rather than domination. Captain Morrison prepared to respond to the Imperial Council's mediation request. He reflected on the strange turn of events that had brought them to this point. They had come to mine asteroids and had ended up changing the fundamental nature of galactic civilization. But that was just how humans approached any challenge. Focus on the practical problem, ignore the political drama, and find a way to get the job done.